We began Daf Lamed Vav, and we'll continue on the top of Daf Lamed Vav with Anan Hachi Kamrina. Let's see if we can find a place. Second. It is approximately 12 lines down from the top of the You'll see a line that begins with Kirabi Shimon. I'm sorry, Birabi Shimon. Anan Hachi Karina. I Rebihi Nokme Bikule Azara. Right, we were talking about which part of the Azara is designated for the smicha when the Kohen Gadol is somech es yadav al rosh hapar, and we're arguing now that since the par is a karban chatos, it requires, as all kachim kachim, safon. But according to Rebbe, the entire azara is considered safon. In the language of the Gemara, Bikula Azara. Meaning, the Azara is made up of the following three parts. One is called the Ezras Yisrael. Then we go west, penetrating closer to the Ezras Kohanim. And then we get to an area which we call Ben Ulam Limizbeach. As far as Shchitas Kodshei Kodshim are concerned, Rebbe maintains that all of the above are considered Safon. And therefore the Gemara doesn't understand why are we being makriv actually we're doing the smicha, but then the Shchita is so close up to the Heicha. There's plenty of room over here. Why does the Mishnah, if it reflects the Shita of Rebbe, require Bein Ulam Lemizbeach, which is all the way up on top, all the way in the west, all the way up front, close to the Eicha? Therefore, it would make more logical sense, the Gemara argues, to interpret our Mishnah not according to Rebbe, but rather according to Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon, who identifies and limits the location for the Shechita of Chatos as the real Safon of the Azor, meaning Bein Ulam Lemizbeach. So the Gemara says, you think you're in the clear. Even according to Rebbe Elazar, Reb Shimon, I have a problem. I should go beyond and expand the possibility beyond Bein Ulam Lemizbeach. Why? Elamaiki Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimoni, and therefore the par was situated Bein Ulam Lemizbeach because the Ezra's Kohen of the Yisrael is not considered Tzafon. Nukme Bein Mizbeach the Lakosa. We have on the northern side a wall which has a kosel. I mean, that's what a wall is. And in the northern part of the Azara, if you're going from the Kir HaTzfoni, the northern side flank of the Mizbeach up until that kosel, that's going to also be an area that's appropriate for Shechita. We saw this in Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Brisa. And this is called the Ikar Tzfon HaZorah. Why? Because it's on the side of the Mizbeach. The Torah says that that's where the Shechita should take place. Al Yerech HaMizbeach Tzafona. So this is an area that's considered Yerech HaMizbeach Tzafona. And Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon never rejected that Shita of Rabbi Yossi. He just added Bein Ulam Lemizbeach, that's also Tzafon. But why Why limit the shechita of the korban chatas on Yom Kippurim to this area called Bein Ul Mizbeach, when you have the entire northern flank of the Mizbeach up until the Kosel? Elamai Isleila Meimar. If you're going to try to reconcile our Mishnah with Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, excuse me, then what are you going to have to say? That the reason why we want to set up the shechita bein ulam lemizbeach is mishum chulsha the Kohen Gadol. We find many halachas about the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, in which we try as best as we can to limit the amount of the effort that taxes him. This is a very heavy day of avodah. And what we want to do is that as soon as he is makabel, the dam of the par, he takes immediately the dam for hazah into the heichal. So if he's bein ulam mizbeach, it's just a few steps to walk into the heichal and do the hazah. If, on the other hand, you're going to set up safon and require shechita on the northern flank, that's going to impose an extra burden on him, because he's going to have to carry a heavy mizrak of dam all the way across the Azara to enter into the west side, into the heichal, in order to do the Azara in the heichal. Once you've already come to that point, then there's no problem in introducing or attributing the Mishnah to Rebbe. The Rebbe Nami Michulcha the Kohen Gadol, even though it's true according to Rebbe, anywhere in the Azara, whether it's the Ezras Kohanim or the Ezras Yisrael, is all considered safon, but the Mishnah insists on bein ulam mizbeach in order to lighten the burden of the Kohen Gadol, so that immediately after he does the shechita, he's makabel adam, he goes into the heichal, and the heichal is just a few steps away. He's not burdened with carrying this very heavy mizrak with dam in it all the way across the Azara. The Azara, I think we said the Azara was 135 amma square. That's a large area, and we make it easy for him. Just simply take the dam after you makabel it, bein ulam mizbeach, take a few steps, go into the mizbeach hapnimi in the heichal, and do the hazah keneged aparoch. The Mishnah says rosho ladaro upanav lamara. So this is a review of what we did yesterday. Amar Rabbi Oke Misrosho, and then the Gemara says V'nukme lehedja. Why do we have to do it in such a way that we turn its head? Amar Rabbi Gzera Shemiyarbitz Glolin. Ton Rabbanan Ketzat Somech Hazevech Omei B'Tzafon Panav L'Mayrov Asomech Omei B'Mizrach Panav L'Mayrov Meniach Shtei Yodav Ben Shtei Akronos Shel Hazevach. So he puts his hands on the head of the bull between its horns. Ubilvad shelo yeh davar chotzetz beino lebein hazevach. His hands should be in direct contact with the head of the bull. And in the note here, he points out that in order to be somech al rosh mamish, the Torah says v'samach yodo al rosh ha'olah, there should be nothing separated his yodo from rosh ha'olah. And not only that, but there's a brisa that says yodo al harosh v'lo yodo al atzavor. It's not enough if he leans on the neck of the bull; he has to specifically lean on the head of the bull, because it says v'samach yodo al rosh ha'olah. Now, what would be the din if he would put one hand on top of the head of the bull and then the other hand on top of that hand? So if you take a look here on the page, you'll see on the right bottom, there's something called a Tosus Yeshanim. And that Tosus Yeshanim says that when it says in the Pasuk V'samach Yodo al Rosho, it means Yado al Rosho, below Yado al Gabi Yado. And you're not allowed to put one hand on top of the other. And certainly you can't have a chatzitza separating your hand. And now, my friends, we get to the vidu. Umisvadeh, and he recites vidu. So he's now doing smicha on a korban chatos, reciting vidu during smicha. On avona chatos. Now, what does avona chatos mean? That we're talking about an avera that was implemented b'shogeg, not deliberate. And a chatos has the power of being mechaper on shgogos. We'll see about a Masechet case later in the Masechet. The al asham avon ha'asham. For example, if a person violates me'ila b'shogeg and he benefits from hegdesh, he brings a korban asham. And there are many other cases where he has to bring korban asham. The al ola, what vidui does he recite on ola? After all, ola is mechaper not for violations, but for the non-fulfillment of positive mitzvahs. Avon leket, shikha upeya, umaiser on. Why does this brisa isolate the agricultural mitzvahs when there are so many and so many other possible mitzvahs that he might have messed up on? Why do you isolate leket, shikha, peya, maiser oni, all of which are called matnas aniyah? And life is even more complicated when you single out leket, shikha, peya, maser. Then you're dealing with a los aser, not just an eser. And here we're talking about a korban ola. Korban ola is not machaper on a los aser, it's machaper on an eser. Now, what kind of los aser do I have in mind? With regard to leket, shikha, peya, the Torah says lo salaket, which means that you're not allowed to take. You're the balabais, you're the owner of the field. You're not allowed to pick up the leket shikhu peya. You have to leave it for the aniyah. And if you take it yourself, then you violate a lav d'oraisa. And here in Parshas Kedoshim, it says v'leket k'tzircha lo salaket. So in addition to the mitzvah of leaving leket shikhu peya for the aniyah, which is derived from the pasuk lo ani v'lager ta'zovosam, we also have a los aser of leket, etc. K'tzircha lo salaket. And that's exactly what Rabbi Akiva is going to object here to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva Omer ein ola ba el al esei ve'al los aser shenitak li esei. But if you violate an Isur los aser straight away, then you cannot bring a korban ola for that. It's just not going to be mechap. So what it means is that Rabbi Akiva holds that you need a bona fide los aser, and if you violate such a los aser, then you cannot bring a korban ola. Under what circumstances can an ola be mechaper? Number one, an essay. And right, he didn't leave any leket shikha peya. O al los aser shenitak li essay. So let's say, for example, a person steals something, that's called a lav hanitak li essay, because the Torah then says v'heishiv v'sagzela asher gaza. And that kind of a los aser, which is nitak li essay, we downgraded to the status of an essay, even though it's a losas, it's his low signal. But because of the fact that the Torah allows you to fulfill an essay of Veheshiv Zela, or let's say in the case of Shiluach Hakan, the Torah says that if you went and you took the mother, Lo Tikach Ha'em Al Abanim, then the Torah gives you an essay of Shalech to Shalom. In all these cases, the Torah is giving you an essay to rectify the law, so that if you did not avail yourself of that essay, then you come under the category of Chayvei essay, and then the Ola could be Machaper.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
But why don't you say, if you take leket, shicha, and pea that's not yours, it's considered stealing. So why cannot you resolve that?
I'll tell you what it is. If, let's say, you would pick up the leket, shicha, and pea, and then at some point later on, you would allow the ani to take it, you would still be in violation of leket, shicha, pea, lo salaket. What I mean to say is that Gzela requires that a person go into someone else's pocket and steal his pocket, his wallet. That's a violation of a law. And according to Rabbi Akiva, the reason why the Ola could be machaper on that law is because it's nitakli es. But in the case of leket lo salaket, this is not Gzela. He's not entering into someone else's possession or his pocket, his domain, and stealing something. He's basically violating an iser of preventing an ani from collecting that which is his. Yeah. It's almost like, let's say, there would be something that's hefker, and you want to come along and make a schia on the hefker, and I lock it up in on the lock and key. I'm preventing you from getting access to something that you have rights to collect. That's what we do to the aniyim if we collect the leket. Instead of leaving it there in the field and the aniyim come into the field to take it, you put it in a place after you collected it and harvested it. The problem is, that's what Rabbi Akiva is raising, that is a full-fledged violation of a losas. In which case the Ola cannot be mechaper. So we don't really understand Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says that in all those cases of matnas aniyim, the Ola has the power to be mechaper. So therefore the Gemara immediately asks for Maika Miflagi. Understanding Rabbi Akiva very well, but what about Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Omar Rabbi Yirmiyah. And here we turn to Daf Lamed Vav Beis. Bilav dinavela kamifligi. In other words, we have a lotasek called nevela, and that becomes, in a sense, a paradigm of a losas. And the Torah says in the 14th chapter of Devarim, lo sochlu kol nevela. And then it says, "Lager asher b'sharecha titmeno v'yachala o machar l'nach." Now there is an essay of taking an avela and giving it to a ger. A ger here we're talking about a ger tocha, it's not a regular ger. Or to sell it to a god. So now we have an essay that appears after the law. The Torah says, number one, lo sochlu kol nevela. And now the Torah says, well, what do you do with this nevela? It's aser b'achila, but it's mutar b'anah. So you have two options, both of which are mandated by the Torah and are elevated to the status of an essay. You can either give it as a gift to a ger, or you can sell it to a nachum. So again, We're talking about a nevela which was not shechted properly. The animal is dead, and he wants to take the corpse of the animal, the nevela, and either give it as a gift to a ger or sell it to a nachri. Now again, when you give a gift gratis of an avela to a ger or sell the avela to a nachri, you're not fixing up any los aseh. I mean, if you violated the los aseh, then it's in your digestive system. You've already eaten the avela. So you can't tell me that when the Torah says like ger asher titnena, that makes the isa of lo sochlu called avela into a lav hanitak lies. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva Sovar, lav ma'al that the lav of nevela is a bona fide lav. It's a regular classic lav, maybe paradigmical lav. It's certainly not a lav anitak lies. By giving the nevela over to a ger, you're not fixing in any way your aver. Is that's called lav ma'al, and therefore you get malchus on it. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Sover lav ma'al. It's not called a lav ma'al. In other words, if the Torah tells you what to do with this nevela, and the Torah spells out that you have the following alternatives, either A or B, then even though it's not a tikkun on the lav in any sense, but it changes the nature of the lav. The lav is no longer a lav ma'alia. It's not a lav gobel. It would not generate malchus. So the Rabbi Yossi Aglili has an expanded definition of a lav hanitakli essay, which is more of a technical, mechanical lav hanitakli essay, where the Torah is not fixing up the averis halav, but telling you what you should do in that scenario. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili is of the opinion that because the Torah went out of its way to tell you what to do in an event that you violated this Isur, that categorizes the Isur as a lav hanitak liyes, and there's no malchus. Now let's talk about leket, shikha, and peah. We'll see if we can fit in this machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili into the machlokas about leket, shikha, and peah. The Torah says that if you went ahead and you took the brains that were meant to be mammon aniyah, they were leket shikha peah, the Torah says, le'oni v'lager tazavos. Tazavos. Again in the Parsha Kedosh. Now, is this a lav hanitak li'esei? In the strict sense, it is not a lav hanitak li'esei. Because when the Torah says le'oni v'lager tazavos, the Torah is not addressing someone who violated the Isur of lo salaket. Torah is telling you that with regard to leket shikhan peah, lo anivel ager tazamos, so you have an overarching obligation to leave the leket shikhan peah for whom? For the ani. That's called lo anivel ager tazamos. Yet, even though the essay is not coming to be Mesaka in the law, but rather it's an essay that appears in the Torah after the law, as if to answer the question, well, you violated the law, what do you do now? What do you do next? But it's not a nituk on the law. According to Rabbi Akiva, as we saw before, that's not a lav anitak li'esei at all. Not in the further, not by an elephant's jump. I don't know. But in any event, that's not called a lav. I'm sorry, that's not called a lav anita kliyase. That's a lav. And therefore, it doesn't come under the kapara power of a korban olah, because an olah is only mechaper on a lav anita kliyase. This is not a lav anita kliyase. A gerva v'lalmon yosem tazov also, that's the ikar mitzvah of leaving leket shikupeya for those aniyim who need it. Or in the case of nevela, according to Rabbi Akiva's logic, when the Torah says, give the nevela to a ger or sell to a guy, that's not a lav anita kliyase. That's a lav gomel, a full-fledged lav. It generates malchus. Comes along Rabbi Yossi Aglin and he says, you know what a lav anita kliyase is? Any time that the Torah tells you after the lav, this is what you do. You ate the nevela, take the nevela, and feed it to the ger tzedek as a gift, or sell it to a guy. The Torah says, lo salake, don't pick up the leket. And then the Torah says, lager, etc., tazov oson. That is a lav hanita kliyase. Why? Because immediately after you violated the lav, the Torah says, la ani v'lager tazov oson. Is memela, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the fact that the Torah says la ani v'lager tazov oson, that downgrades the status of the Isav lo salakik. It is like a lav hanita kliyase. And therefore, it is subject to the kapara of a korban olah. Korban olah cannot be mechaper on a classic lav, but it can be mechaper on a lav hanita kliyase. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili is postulating a broad-scoped definition of lav hanita kliyase, which includes even the case of an essay that came after the lav, but it's not a nituk on the lav. In no way is it going to rectify the lav. Now, I will say, in the light of this sugya, if we go back to Lamed Vavam and Aleph, and I ask you the question, it says, what about all the other essays? The answer is that Rabbi Yossi Aglili went out of his way to point out that even these cases, where there is a violation of a lav, lend themselves to the kapara of the korban olah. And why is that? Because the Torah formulates the essay after the lav, as if to say, fix up the lav and do the essay, which is not true. But the similarity to a lav and anything, let's say, is sufficient enough to exempt you from any sort of punishment. He says here in the note, Afal Pisha Babraisa Mashba Shenechleku Beleket Shikhu Peah, Kavanosa Lomer, Shekshem Shenechleku Belavim, Elu, Shem Lav Sheyeshli Achrov Ese, the Eno Menatko, Nechleku Gam Bin Nevela. Okay, Rabbosai, so this is where we're going to stop for today and for this week. I think it's still early enough to call it Lag BaOmer and wish everyone a wonderful and meaningful Lag BaOmer. And